Good morning, ministers, members of parliament, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, I'm very happy to be here with you to discuss the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, and that may sound as a platitude, not only because so many speeches begin with a declaration like that, but also because some of you might know that as EU Trade Commissioner, I have to give a lot of speeches on this topic. In fact, of all the issues I work on, this is the one that most people are interested in. So that means lots of invitations to speak about. And if I may be frank, I sometimes would be happy to give fewer of them, but not this morning. So I'm very happy to discuss this topic here in Wroclaw today, and for two good reasons. The first reason becomes clear when you look at the attendance list for this global forum. We have government representatives, we have researchers and have university officials, but we also have many business people drawn from the thriving economy of this city and Poland. Companies from Poland, from other parts of the European Union, and from across the Atlantic are all working together and in parallel to do business, of course, but also to improve local people's quality of life in the process. And there could be no better illustration of what we are trying to do with the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Those companies are examples of how transatlantic trade at 2 billion euros a day and investment, which has reached stocks of more than 3 trillion euro overall, is already very strong. The reason it is strong is because it is supported by many bridges. And some of these are physical, like the thousands of communication cables, flight paths and shipping routes that allow information and people, goods and services to travel freely from America to Europe and vice versa. But others, just as important, exist only in the form of written words that govern our behavior. And to give the best example, the rules of the World Trade Organization mean that both the European Union and the United States are committed to economic openness. What we are doing with TTIP is widening that bridge of rules. We are adding extra lanes so that more prosperity can travel between our economies in the form of goods, services and investment. And we are going to do that in many different ways, removing tariffs and barriers to service trade, making regulations more compatible, expanding public procurement opportunities, protecting investments, and creating a true transatlantic market for energy. Our aim is to expand opportunities for people like the citizens of Poland. We want them to continue to benefit from existing investment and trade, and we want them to think bigger, to look even more to the US as a market for Polish business, services, car parts or food. And not just directly, we have to remember that Poland, huge exports to Germany, for instance, very often end up being sold on the US market once they are incorporated in German products. Polish exporters helped this country keep growing during the crisis. They have shown they can take on the world. TTIP will help them to do that and make the whole country more prosperous as a result. However, some of you may know, and here let me also be frank, that many people have doubts about this deal. They believe that to get these gains with the United States, we will have to sacrifice some of the core principles of European society. They say that in order to get this deal, the European Union will have to abandon our commitment to high levels of protection for people's health and safety, or the environment, or financial stability. They say that we will have to change our laws on genetically modified food, or that we want to weaken the tough regulation of banks that we just put in place after the crisis. They say all this even when both sides have made very clear that we have no intention of lowering protections. There are some who say that the European Union and the United States are prepared to give total domination to multinational companies through investor-to-state dispute settlements, even if we have explained that our objective on investment is quite the opposite. We are not starting from scratch here. Poland, for example, is one of several member states that already has a bilateral investment treaty with the US. Poland also has more than 30 other agreements like this, and EU member states overall have about 1,400 of them. So what we are trying to do in TTIP is to start updating all of these agreements to include stronger safeguards that will help avoid frivolous cases and ensure that we protect our right to regulate, while continuing to encourage job-creating investment. And there are some who say that these negotiations are undemocratic and opaque. Even when the European Commission publishes its negotiating position, consults with stakeholders and seeks the Council of the European Parliament, all with the strong support of the EU governments in the Council. And even when it is written in black and white in the Treaty of Lisbon that no deal can pass without the approval of both those bodies. Let me be clear. I welcome this debate. I like debating. Detailed public discussion can only lead to better policies, and it is a core part of our democracy. But it brings me to the second reason I'm glad to be here with you, because on Wednesday we celebrated the 25th anniversary of the fall of communism, a day that commemorates the democratic revolutions of 1998, 1989 and transformed our whole continent. A day that marked the beginning of the return journey of this country and 10 others from the communist bloc to the heart of the European project. But also a day that reminds us of the deep well of values that we share with the United States. And those values include open markets, democracy, and respect for the individual that is the basis for the entire edifice of regulation on both sides of the Atlantic. And Europe and the United States are among the very small number of places in the world that respect all of these values. On all of these points, we share so much more than on what we differ. We only need to look beyond our noses to see that. And strengthening, not weakening, those shared values is what this agreement is all about. Because though we are the two largest economies in the world is not static. The great fact of our time is that new economic powers on our own continent and all around the world are emerging. Let me be clear, those new powers are very welcome. Just as the West's prosperity through globalization has fueled their rise, their prosperity is creating opportunities for us. But the best way to make sure that mutually reinforcing process continues is by making sure that we have an international system, political and economic, that remains committed to open markets, democracy, and respect for the individual. But Europe and America's capacity to do that is gradually falling, along with our share of the world economy. So we need to maximize our influence by sticking together and leading by example. Sticking together has been the focus of President Obama's visit to your country, to Poland, Brussels and to France this week. He naturally emphasized Poland's important place in the Transatlantic Alliance and also naturally its security dimension. But TTIP can also help. And how can it? By finding ways to make our regulations on products like cars and medicines more compatible, showing in the process that global rules on issues like this are possible. Or by uniting our approaches to the way labour rights and the values on environmental protection can best be supported by trade, and by establishing the principle that we are all better off when energy and raw materials are traded along market principles. In fact, given today's foreign policy challenges, removing the legal uncertainty that undermines transatlantic trade in energy would be perhaps the strongest way this deal would support our alliance. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not for a moment pretend that the transatlantic trade and investment partnership will change the world as much as that election of May 1989 or the fall of the wall in Berlin 6 months later. But I do assert that by creating new economic opportunities and by strengthening shared Atlantic values in a changing world, it will change people's lives for the better. And I will continue to make every effort to convince people of that fact. But that's not the task of me alone, or for the European Commission alone. It is the responsibility of everyone in this room, government representatives, or academic, business people, or activists who want a prosperous and stable future for this continent. I hope, therefore, that I can count on your help. Shortly before becoming Poland's first post-communist prime minister, the late Tadeusz Mazowiecki was asked on American television about what he saw as his greatest task. He answered that it was to convince people that things can be better. We know that defense did not follow a straight line from 1989 to where we are today. There were many ups and downs. But the countless Polish people who brought this country forward over the last 25 years rose to meet those challenges. And when I look around in this room, and when any of us looks across the whole European continent, there can be no doubt things did get better, much better indeed. This agreement presents us with the same challenge today. We must also rise to meet it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yep, in the second one. Commissioner, thank you very much for your introductory remarks. You provided a compelling argument in favor of TTIP. Poland is a country that doesn't need much convincing, contrary to some other countries around Europe. We are generally in favor of the transatlantic trade and agreement partnership. So I wanted to go down a little bit from the level of ideas and policies to the level of practice. What is your assessment? When is the agreement feasible in terms of time? We understand it's not this year because it's impossible, both politically and in terms of the negotiation itself. When would it be good or advisable to finish the negotiation?
I believe we have a very important window of opportunity next year. We can do a lot of work now, and we are doing. I mean, we just got a negotiating round, and there will be several more this year. We're having a stock taking in a couple of months. Next week I'm going to the US to see Mike Froman again. So we are actively working. But because of the reasons that you just mentioned, the midterm elections probably is difficult to, let's say, to make the tough political choices this year. But I think we should do it next year. Because if not, we end up in the electoral cycle for electing a new president in the United States, and then, so it seems to me that the best window of opportunity we have is next year, and it is feasible, you know. I mean, we know what it is about, what are the problems, we know each other very well, so it's now a matter of political resolve, and that political resolve doesn't necessarily need a lot of time. You could even argue that you better try to do it in a very rather short period of time.
Mm-hmm. And setting aside political issues and the concerns that there are not only in Europe but also in some quarters in America, if you were to name 3 stumbling blocks that you see in terms of the negotiating rounds, what are the 3 issues that will be most difficult to achieve a compromise on?
You know, all of these negotiations are difficult. We are presently engaged in 14 negotiations. All of them are difficult. An easy trade negotiation doesn't exist, you know. And this is a very big one. So obviously, this is a very difficult issue to manage, but I think we can. And so I wouldn't like to reason in terms of stumbling blocks. Let me rather say difficult files. I think it will not be easy to open the US public procurement market, because it's a 2-layered market, you know. It's at the federal level and at the state level, and states are very independent from the federal level in this. in fact, much more independent than the EU member states are from the, let's say, the European edifice. You know? And you have also the Buy America. I think Buy America is not compatible with a TTIP agreement. So that will certainly not be easy to tackle. Huh? For us in Europe, agriculture will not be easy. Not be that much because there would be an imbalance in trade on agricultural products, because in fact we have a trade surplus on agriculture and processed agricultural products with the United States. And there's no reason that it would go down, but the benefits of that are spread along the European Union, and the difficulties are much more localized in a limited number of regions, and that's always difficult. It's always difficult to manage. You will have problems in opening the services market. We have a different appraisal of the precautionary principle. That we are not going to change in Europe, but that United States are criticizing. I could give you a very long list of this, you know. Normally when you have only one problem, that is very, very difficult to tackle. You know? If you have many, sometimes it's easier because you can more easily find balances.
Even if you manage to complete the negotiations and arrive at an agreement, hopefully next year, there will be the problem of political ratification, not only around Europe, which probably is more problematic, but also on the other side of the Atlantic. We had a European election which showed very high results for Eurosceptic parties. Part of that Euroscepticism in countries like France is driven by people's fear around globalization, and TTIP is a symbol partly of that. I want to ask you, how do you think leaders in countries like France or in Germany, where the NSA affair is also causing anti-Americanism, can really overcome that opposition towards TTIP? Will it be possible to ratify the final agreement politically in big European countries?
Well, first of all, NSA and what happened has not contributed to the atmosphere in which these negotiations are taking place. Let's be serious about it, and I think we should also find a way out there, and a better understanding and a new understanding between the EU and the US. Not in TTIP itself, but it will have to be part of the global picture, I believe. But apart from that, I'm pretty confident that if you get to an agreement, a good agreement, and if it's not a good agreement, we are not going to make it. If it's not an ambitious one, we are not going to make it either. So if you have a good and an ambitious agreement, then I'm pretty confident that you also get it through the European Parliament. I see no reason why it would not be the case. I'm not going to pronounce myself on the American Congress. As a European politician, I should not pronounce myself on the Parliament of the other party. That's up to the many Americans here in the room to do so. But I see no reason why it would not be possible. And let me also give us a little comment on what your analysis of the European elections is. I'm not sure that this is the whole picture. You know that, for example, in France, that so many people voted for Front National because of TTIP. I don't believe that. It has to see much more with a general discomfort with politics and in general, and French politics more in detail. So it's so easy to say it's TTIP and it's because you are negotiating this agreement, it's because of Brussels. In Brussels, that's then, of course, the building I have my office in. That's really too easy. You know? If everybody were to tackle their own problems at their level, I think it would be better.